The UEFA Champions League, it's the pinnacle of club football, isn't it? The biggest stage for the best players in the world. We've seen some truly dominant teams over the years, haven't we? Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, Munich, Liverpool, Manchester United, the list goes on. But football's a funny old game, and as we all know, form is temporary, but class is permanent. And sometimes, even the giants of the game can fall. Today we're going to be taking a look at 10 former European champions who have fallen from grace. Some have recovered, some are on the way back, and some, well, let's just say they've got a long way to go. Let's start with a club that holds a special place in English football history, Nottingham Forest. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nottingham Forest, European champions twice? Oh yes. Believe it or not, under the charismatic and often outspoken Brian Clough, Forest were the kings of Europe. Back-to-back European Cups in 79 and 80. They were a team that defied the odds, a team that played with a swagger and a belief that was just incredible to watch. They had it all: flair, determination and a never-say-die attitude. But like all good things, their time at the top eventually came to an end. Clough's departure was a huge blow, and the club struggled to adapt to life without him. Financial mismanagement and poor decisions on and off the pitch saw them relegated from the Premier League, and they even spent a few seasons in the third tier of English football. Imagine that. A two-time European champion playing against the likes of, well, you know who. But there's a glimmer of hope for Forest fans. They're back in the Premier League now, and while they're still a long way from challenging for top honours, at least they're back amongst the elite. Now let's talk about a team that knows a thing or two about winning the European Cup: AC Milan. 7 titles, second only to Real Madrid. The Rossoneri were a force to be reckoned with in the late 80s and early 90s, with the likes of Marco van Basten, Ruud Gullit and Franco Baresi gracing the San Siro. They were back at it again in the 2000s with Andriy Shevchenko, Kaká and Paolo Maldini leading them to glory. They were the team everyone wanted to beat, the team everyone feared, but then the decline set in. Financial fair play regulations hit them hard, and they struggled to keep up with the big spenders in the Premier League. The club had to sell some of their star players, and the results on the pitch started to suffer. They went from Champions League regulars to struggling to even qualify for the competition. It was a sad sight to see. But there are signs of life at the San Siro. Once again, they've been crowned champions of Italy again, and they're back in the Champions League. Can they return to their former glory? Well, you can never write off a team with the history and tradition of AC Milan. Now, for a story that's as much about politics as it is about football, Red Star Belgrade. In 1991, they achieved the unthinkable, becoming the first and to this day only Serbian team to lift the European Cup, beating Marseille on penalties in a tense final. They had a team full of talented players, many of whom went on to have successful careers in some of Europe's biggest leagues. But then, tragedy struck. The breakup of Yugoslavia and the subsequent war had a devastating impact on the region, and football was far from immune. Red Star lost many of their best players, and the club's infrastructure was decimated. They went from being European champions to struggling to even compete in the newly formed Serbian league. It's a stark reminder of how conflict can destroy even the beautiful game. These days, Red Star are still a big team in Serbia, but their days of challenging for European honours seem a long way off. Chapter 4. Now, let's talk about a team that knows how quickly fortunes can change in football: Olympique Marseille. In 1993, they became the first and still the only French team to win the Champions League, beating AC Milan in the final. They were a team built on solid defending and clinical counter-attacking, and they had a real will to win, but their triumph was short-lived. Just a year later, they were embroiled in a match-fixing scandal that rocked French football to its core. They were stripped of their league title, relegated to the second division and banned from European competition. It was a spectacular fall from grace. It took them years to recover, but they eventually fought their way back to the top of French football. These days, Marseille are once again a force to be reckoned with in Liga 1, but they've yet to replicate their European success of the early 90s. Chapter 5. Now, for a team that's synonymous with attacking, attractive football, Ajax. The Amsterdam club are four-time European champions, and they've always been known for their commitment to youth development and their philosophy of total football. Just think about some of the players who've come through their academy. Johan Cruyff, Marco van Basten, Dennis Bergkamp, Frank Rijkaard, the list goes on and on. But in recent years, Ajax have struggled to keep up with the financial muscle of Europe's elite clubs. They've become a selling club, forced to cash in on their best players year after year. And while they've had their moments in Europe, reaching the Champions League semi-final in 2019, they're no longer the force they once were. It's a shame because Ajax represent everything that's good about football attacking flair, youth development, and a commitment to playing the beautiful game. Chapter 6. Now for a team that's fallen a long way from their glory days, Hamburger SV. They were crowned European champions in 1983, beating Juventus in the final. They were a dominant force in German football at the time, winning 3 Bundesliga titles in the space of 4 years. But then the decline set in. They struggled to replace their aging stars, and they made a series of poor managerial appointments. And in 2018, the unthinkable happened. Hamburg were relegated from the Bundesliga for the first time in their history. It was a sad day for German football. They've bounced between the Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2 in recent years. They're a long way from challenging for top honours again. Now for a team that holds a special place in the hearts of football fans all over the world, Celtic. The Lisbon Lions of 1967, a team that played with a swagger and a style that was all their own. They were the first British team to win the European Cup, and they did it with a team made up entirely of players born within 30 miles of Celtic Park. It was an incredible achievement. But since then, Celtic have struggled to compete with the financial might of Europe's elite clubs. The disparity between the Scottish Premier League and the top leagues in England, Spain, Italy and Germany is vast, and it's become increasingly difficult for Celtic to hold on to their best players. That being said, they're still a dominant force in Scottish football, and they always provide passionate opposition in Europe. Now, for a team that's been cursed by a former manager, Benfica, they were a dominant force in European football in the early 1960s, winning back-to-back European Cups in 1961 and 1962. They were led by the legendary Eusebio, one of the greatest players of all time. But then, disaster struck. Their manager, Bela Guttmann, asked for a pay rise after their second European Cup triumph, but the board refused. Guttmann was furious, and he supposedly cursed the club, saying that they wouldn't win another European trophy for 100 years. And guess what? They haven't. They've reached 8 European finals since then, but they've lost them all. It's enough to make you believe in curses, isn't it? Now for a team that pulled off one of the biggest shocks in European Cup history, Steaua Bucharest. In 1986, they became the first and still the only Romanian team to win the European Cup, beating Barcelona on penalties in the final. It was a remarkable achievement for a team from behind the Iron Curtain. They were a talented bunch with the likes of Gheorghe Hagi, Marius Lakatos and Victor Peturca in their ranks. But their success was short-lived. The fall of communism in Eastern Europe had a profound impact on Romanian football, and Steaua were hit hard. They lost many of their best players to wealthier clubs in Western Europe, and they struggled to adapt to the new reality. They've never been able to replicate their success. And finally, let's talk about a team that's experienced both the highs and lows of European football in recent years, Inter Milan. In 2010, they completed a historic treble, winning Serie A, the Coppa Italia and the Champions League under Jose Mourinho. They were a formidable team with the likes of Wesley Sneijder, Samuel Eto'o and Diego Milito firing on all cylinders. But then, Mourinho left for Real Madrid and Inter went into a period of decline. They went through a succession of managers, none of whom could replicate Mourinho's success. They struggled to keep up with the financial muscle of Juventus in Serie A, and they went through a period of several years without even qualifying for the Champions League. But there's light at the end of the tunnel for Inter fans. They've won the Serie A title since then, and they even reached the Champions League final in 2023. So there you have it, 10 teams that have tasted Champions League glory but have fallen on hard times. Football is a cyclical game, isn't it? What goes up must come down. These teams were once the kings of Europe, but for one reason or another, their time at the top came to an end. Some have managed to rebuild and recover, while others are still struggling to find their way back. But one thing's for sure, football wouldn't be the same without them. They're a reminder that even the biggest giants can fall, and that nothing in football lasts forever. But who knows? Maybe one day we'll see some of these fallen giants rise again. After all, as we all know, anything is possible in football.